Hi everyone and welcome. So long time no see, I actually took a little bit of a break from BookTube and books in general actually, because I felt like I was in the middle of a reading slump, but I was not allowing myself to not read because books and BookTube is such a big part of my personal life and of my, just hobbies and free time that it's very weird if you then not really like reading anymore for a short period of time. So I kept pushing myself to read. I was also in the middle of a lot of buddy reads, read-alongs, all of that stuff. So I actually could not stop to read because that would have implications for other people as well. And then I decided, well, this is not fun anymore. I shouldn't be stressed out about reading a book by a certain time or by making videos, because if I don't have video out by Wednesday, then this will happen. It's a hobby and I shouldn't feel like that. So I decided to take a step back. I'm actually at the moment a couple of weeks off of work. I have a new insulin pump and I decided to focus on that and just relaxing and recharging my batteries. So actually, I just started missing BookTube again, and I think that that's like the signal that it's time to just make another video. So I thought that this was the perfect opportunity to do a recent wrap-up, because I haven't done a wrap-up for June, and I have read one book in July. I'm still very much in the middle of a reading slump, and I will have to pick my current reads and my next reads with a little bit more care, just to make sure that I am enjoying it. And then towards the end of the video, I will also show you what I am currently reading, because I am in the middle of quite a bit of books, basically because I don't really know what I am enjoying at the moment. So I'm starting a lot of books and then just pausing them for a minute and then starting another book, and now I have a small pile. So also just organizing that a little bit might be a good idea. And the first book that I managed to finish in June was actually an audiobook, and that was City of Dragons by Robin Hobb, which is the third book in the Rainwild Chronicles sub-series in the Realm of the Elderlings, and that is actually the fourth sub-series. So I cannot really tell you a lot about the plot, but this third book I actually liked, and it was very much different from the first two in my opinion. Because in the first two you have two main characters and they are in the same place. So it feels very cozy, it feels like you're following one group of characters and that's it. And in the first two books, what they were going through didn't really have a lot of implications for the bigger picture. While here we are actually also following some people in different places of this part of the world. And because we are following the satrap, for example, you also see how these small things that are happening with our older or our original group actually have implications for the bigger picture. And I actually really like that. And I also think, because this is the third book, this is a quartet, that this will definitely have an effect on the last and final book. So I'm very curious to see what Robin Hobb does with all of this, because of course this is done very deliberately. This is not an accident. This is done with a reason, so I do want to see what happens in the last book. But so far, I'm really enjoying this series. I know that a lot of books don't really like the narration for this series, but I'm enjoying it just fine. So yes, Robin Hobb, she never disappoints. After that, I finished two physical reads, and these are the smallest books ever. So I finished Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher first. This is a new release. I think it came out either in May or in June, and I really enjoyed this one. Now, T. Kingfisher is an author who has written a lot of fairy tale retellings, but this is one of her original fairy tales. I have read The Raven and the Reindeer by her previously, which is a Snow Queen retelling, and I absolutely loved that. That's a 5-star read. I still think about that book, and it was only 200 pages. Now, this is an original fairy tale, and I liked it, but I didn't like it as much as The Raven and the Reindeer, and I also think that it maybe could have been better. Now, still, the writing style is just the way that I like it. It's just as good as in The Raven and the Reindeer, and it does have that fairy tale-esque feeling. Now, this is sold as a dark fairy tale, and in the beginning you definitely feel that. For example, there's mentions of cannibals, and that these cannibals actually became cannibals because they were starving. So in itself, that's a very bleak, very grim, a very pessimistic view on the world, but it felt very realistic in a very grim sense, I should say. And then as the story continues, it feels more like an absurd kind of horror, and it has some funny bits, but it's very absurd humor, and I like that as well. So there was a switch in, I think, maybe 1/3 of the book, and even though I liked that, it was also a little bit weird, because it started very bleak, very grim, and then it went into absurdity. So I don't really know what I think about that. I think that I would have liked it more if it stayed in the grim and the dark atmosphere more than the absurd one. But I do think that T. Kingfisher can pull off both of them. I also think that the story in itself was quite enjoyable. And towards the end, I really liked the conclusion as well. I was expecting maybe a little bit more, but in the end, still a solid read that I think a lot of people will appreciate. However, I think that if you might not like this one as much, I do still think that you will like her Snow Queen retelling, because that felt more grounded maybe, in a sense. But still, very happy that I picked it up. And this has cemented T. Kingfisher as an author that I want to read more of. And I actually have a Beauty and the Beast retelling by her, I think, Bryony and Roses, that I have on my shelves that I will be reading quite soon. And just to see if I like her retellings maybe more than her original works. The next physical read is one that I have a full spoiler-free vlog for that only lasts 10 minutes, so I will link it here if you haven't seen it yet. It doesn't really take a lot of your time, but that is Stardust by Neil Gaiman. Now, this is of course also an original fairy tale, and this is actually a portal fantasy. Now, I don't like portal fantasy books. I never read them because every time that I pick them up, I actually dislike them. However, this one, while you're reading it, you don't even notice that it's a portal fantasy. In the beginning, it's mentioned that the city of Wall, I think that it's the city of Wall. Maybe the city is called something else, but I'm just going to call it the city of Wall. That it's somewhere in England, and they mention London and cars once. After that, Tristan, our main character, goes to the other side of the wall, and there he is in this fairy tale landscape with all of these magical beings. And after that, it's never mentioned that we actually have our own world and that this is set in our world. So I never felt that while reading it, which is why I probably still enjoyed this book, because otherwise I would not have. Now, this has a lot of humor, and it's also that absurd kind of humor that I really enjoy. While I was reading this, I was also watching the movie. I actually enjoyed the ending of the movie especially more than this one. I think that here you have different players, and you think towards the first half of the book, I think that you've met all of them, but then more players are added and the story grows even more absurd. And I quite enjoyed that, but towards the end, it seems like all of the different parties couldn't really be brought together in a very unique way or in a very satisfying way, while in the movie, they did manage to do that. So I think that if I would have read this on itself, I would have thought that this is amazing, but now seeing how it could have done actually better and how it could have been improved, I think that this is a fine book, and this is definitely a good introduction, I think, to Neil Gaiman, because I have heard from quite a bit of people that it's not his best works, but it still introduces you to his writing style. But yeah, that's it. It's a fine read. It's not going to be an all-time favorite. It's not one that I'm going to think about even now. I cannot really remember what happened so differently in this one than the movie. It's the movie that I remember. It's not really this small book. So it's great because I know that I now love Neil Gaiman's writing style. I really enjoyed that here. But the story in itself, that was fine, but nothing really unique or nothing that is really going to stand out towards the end of the year, for example. But still, a very nice little original fairy tale. Now, the final book that I finished in June was an audiobook. That was actually a huge disappointment for me. That was The Emperor of Thorns by Mark Lawrence. This is the finale of the Broken Empire trilogy, which was a 5-star prediction for me, and in the end was maybe a 2-star series. Now, I don't want to judge it too harshly because I do think that there is a public for it out there, but I think that the public is very specific. I think if you love fast-paced, post-apocalyptic, grimdark with an anti-hero sort of main character, I think that this might be something for you. But I think that most people, I don't know, I don't think that a lot of people would actually enjoy it. Now, first of all, Prince of Thorns, the first chapter, is one that I've read a couple of years back, and I loved Mark Lawrence's writing style. And that's definitely still true throughout the 3 books. I really enjoyed how Mark Lawrence could tell the story, how he wrote very poetic at times, which is a very nice contrast to the grim, dark horrors that are actually happening in the book. However, the story in itself, and more specifically the characters, I didn't really care about. Now, York is a very dark character, and I think that a lot of people maybe mistake what I'm saying for I don't like how dark he is. I don't care how dark he is, but I think that he is just very one-dimensional. And especially in the first book, that's it. He's an edgelord. He does very nasty things. Why? Because he likes to do them. And that's everything that you know about him. So you can't really feel a connection with him. You don't really understand why he does the things he does. And at the same time, he has also very big plot armor. You know from the start that he's going to be absolutely fine, because it is established from the get-go, basically, that he is some sort of wonder boy. He can make things done and everybody listens to him, even though he's still like 12, 14 years old. He has established himself as some sort of genius who can do no wrong, and all of his plans, even if people don't really know how he's going to pull it off, somehow he is going to pull it off. So that is established in the first book of the trilogy, so you're not really worried that anything will happen. And maybe that's a mistake that I have made in the past, but I always felt that Grimdark does not have that. Grimdark has the unpredictability. That's why I gravitate towards Grimdark quite a bit. That's why I like some series that are not Grimdark, such as the Dandelion Dynasty, so much, because it is unpredictable, because things can happen to our main characters, to the people that we care about. In the Broken Empire trilogy, I never felt that. I always felt like our main characters, yeah, they're the bad guys and they're horrible and what they do is absolutely atrocious, but they're going to be just fine. Something else that I don't really like is that this story is not grounded at all. And I don't really know how to explain this, but you have different timelines. Now, first of all, different timelines in itself, it's fine, but if you use it, it really needs to have a purpose for me. Otherwise, I'm not really going to care about it, and I like a linear story much more. If it reveals something big and it reveals a plot twist and it makes you think about everything that happened in the past, that's nice. But here we had different timelines, and I often could not really remember in which timeline we were, because the only constant was York. And York didn't change in the different timelines. He was just the same boy over and over and over again. So by how York acted, you couldn't really say, is he 10 in this story, is he 14, is he 20? Which is in itself a pretty big problem. Then we have the secondary characters. Now, the secondary characters, first of all, they are more or less the same in the different timelines, but the ones that are different were not established enough, were not unique enough, were not developed enough that they made the story different, that they made the story different, or the timeline, that they made you realize, oh, okay, he's 14 in this timeline because we have this secondary character. They were not well developed. Only York was somewhat developed. Then another thing that these different timelines did was maybe 4 years back, timeline 4 years back, something was introduced. Well, you could bet your money on it that in the next chapter, when it's current time, so 4 years later, that something is going to solve something. It's going to help York forward. And that felt like a huge Deus Ex Machina to me. Even though it's not, it's like, oh, I actually need something in this chapter, so I'm going to just put a chapter in between that's 4 years earlier, I'm going to introduce this and then I can use that. And it's just a very cheap way for me, and it takes a lot of the suspense away. And that's why I say that I would have enjoyed it a lot more if it was told chronologically, where something in book 1, York finds something or something happens, and that's going to have an impact on something that happens in book 3, other than just 2 chapters away from each other. So all in all, I just really didn't like how this was delivered. I didn't like the secondary characters. I didn't like York that much, especially in the second and the third book. Some things about his past were revealed, which I think were done to make him a little bit more dimensional and more developed, but it just felt like it was too on the nose. Like, oh, I need to add something here to make York feel more human, so let's add something very cruel that happened in his past, and people are going to feel sorry for him. So maybe I was too harsh by that point because I didn't like the first book, and I was reading it with like negative feelings about it already. Maybe I was too harsh about it, but that's how it felt for me. Also, the big revelation towards the end of the third book was such a letdown. It was so underwhelming what happened there that I finished the book and I was like, okay, I guess. So, I disliked the first book. I think that the second and the third book were better, but all in all, I did not like the series. And I think that I can probably recommend it to a very specific audience. Like I said, I will still try more of Mark Lawrence's books because I do really enjoy his writing style, but the story in itself in this book, I just didn't really enjoy. It didn't really work for me, unfortunately. I am quite happy that I finished the entire trilogy in 3 months. So maybe I should have done that with a trilogy that I actually enjoyed, but still, here we are. And then the only book so far that I have finished in July, and that is Summers at Castle Auburn by Sharon Chin. I'm so happy that I finally picked up this book. This is an older fantasy standalone. It's often recommended to fans of Juliet Marillier, and I do understand the recommendation. Now, I do think that this is on the lighter side of what you read in Juliet Marillier's books, but all in all, this is just a feel-good story. In this one, we follow bastard of a royal family, and every summer she goes to the castle to live there with, part of her family. And throughout the winter and fall and all of that, she lives with her grandmother, who is a sort of herb woman. Now, I thought this was going to be so emotional because I thought that she wasn't really going to have a place in the castle, that she was going to feel very depressed. It also says that she's in love with a boy that she can't really have because of her social status. So I thought that this was going to be a heart-wrenching story. Now, in itself, it's actually not, because she is accepted in the castle. She has a sister that she loves, and the sister loves her as well. And it's actually just such a heartwarming story. Also because our main character is actually very happy. And she is always she lights up the room almost. And she never really thinks about sad stuff that much. So because of that, I liked it. It was a coming-of-age story that was very sweet. And of course, in the end, she does end up with someone. It's a little bit of a fantasy romance. I do think that everything was it was wrapped in a bow quite nicely, but I didn't mind it for this kind of story. So in the end, you also have a side story, a side plot, you could say, of the Aliora, who are kind of fairies almost. And I wish that was either more developed, so it was more on the forefront, or it was just left out of the story, because now it was just kind of there, but it was not really important that much. But I did really like the writing style. I loved how feel-good this was, so I would definitely recommend it for people who are looking for something like that. A lighter read. It almost felt like slice of life fantasy, and just in general, something that you can definitely read in between your more political intrigue books, and you just want to read a book about a girl who's living her life and who's kind of happy about that. So yes, in the end, I'm very happy that I picked this one up. This was also the perfect book to read while I was in a reading slump, because it just read so easily. I was reading chapters after chapters, and normally in a reading slump, I can maybe read like 20 pages a day. Here, I was reading close to 100, and I actually did finish this in just a couple of days, because it is not that long. It's 340 pages long. So perfect one. Actually very happy that I finally picked this one up. For the sake of not making this video too long, I'm just going to quickly go over the books that I'm currently in the middle of. Some of these you have already seen because I have started them, well, a couple of weeks ago at this point, but Kushiel's Chosen by Jacqueline Carey. This is the second book in the Fader trilogy. I actually just picked this up today after a very long hiatus. So I'm currently 200 pages in. I read 30 pages today, I think, which is quite good. I'm absolutely loving the story. Kushiel's Dart is one of my favorite books that I've picked up this year. It is my favorite book that I've picked up this year, let's be honest here. And this one is just as good. So I think that this one will be my priority for the next couple of days, and just to get back into reading, because when you're in a reading slump, you just need to pick up books that you absolutely love. And this is definitely it. Also, Jacqueline Carey's writing style, it reads very fluently to me, because it's a beautiful writing style, but it's not difficult to get through. So perfect for now, and I'm so happy that I'm liking it just as much as Kushiel's Dart. So yes, definitely. Plus, I don't know if you can see, but here you have my entire collection, and currently I have the first 6 books, so the first 2 trilogies. So I definitely have a lot to get through. Then, of course, I'm also still reading Memories of Ice by Stephen Erickson. Now, I must say that I am 500 pages in, so I am a little bit over halfway through, and I'm really enjoying this book, but I am so surprised by people who told me before I picked it up, this is the easiest melasm book. This is the one that reads the fastest, you're going to fly through it. If you can get through Gardens of the Moon and you can get through That House Gates, this one is going to just be even faster. Really? I think that this is just such a huge step up between That House Gates and this one in terms of how difficult it is to get through and how slow it reads. Because That House Gates I could get through very easily. I think that that's more a character-driven story maybe, and that's why I, as a character-driven reader, I felt very connected to the characters. I flew through it. This one is more focused on the world building. We learn a lot about the gods, we learn a lot about the Malazan Empire, we learn a lot about the history of this world and about the different races and all of that, and it's a lot. It's a lot for this tiny brain. Maybe I'm too stupid for Malazan, I don't know. But this is the first book, the third one in the series, where I feel that I understand what people are saying when they say 10 pages in a normal book is 1 page in a Malazan book. Because yes, it's feeling that way. And of course, being in a slump is not helping at this point. But I think that I'm just going to go back and forth between these two so I can just still make progress in this one and not forget too many things. I still want to stay on top of the story because horrible things are happening here. There are definitely things that are so interesting, and I don't want people to misunderstand that I'm not liking it. I'm liking it, but it's taking me a long time to get through it, and I also want to understand what's happening here. And it's not coming as naturally to me as what happened in That House Gates. And I think that a big part of it is that I'm not having the connection to the characters here that I felt to some of the characters in That House Gates. Here it's more about the world, and I want to know more about the world, but sometimes we switch to different characters to different position in this world, and I just need to think, who are they? What's happening here exactly? Just to switch back. And yeah, I just need to prioritize this a little bit. So I just need 400 more pages, and I just want to finish this before the end of the month. And then I'm going to be happy. So I'm not going to push myself too much. Just a couple of pages each day should do the trick. And then the last one that I'm currently in the middle of. And let me tell you, this is probably going to be a surprise for some, but I'm thinking about DNFing this one. And that's Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, which is the second book in the Stormlight Archive series, which is the series that I'm hosting a read-along for. So some of you might say, weren't you doing a discussion for this book? Actually, the 17th of July, which is today, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I was. But I was in the middle of a reading slump. Like I said, I had that new insulin pump, and I just didn't know if it was going to happen. Now, currently, I am 200 pages in. In the beginning, I thought, I'm so happy that it's better than Way of Kings, because Way of Kings, let's be honest, for me, if I'm being completely honest, it's max a 3-star book for me. But now I just finished part 1, and I realized that I just really don't like how Sanderson is telling the story. I couldn't care less, especially the interludes. The interludes are They're killing the story for me, because for me it feels like a very artificial way of Brandon Sanderson to open up the world, to make you think that this world is so vast, so big, but actually you don't really know these people, so you also don't really care about that. I think that this is a great story, and I think that if a more skilled author would have written it, I would have enjoyed it more. I also think that the magic system is just too hard magic system for me. Like when he is explaining things that a certain character here is doing, it feels like I am just reading a script of a Marvel movie where now this character is doing this and then he does this and he blocks it and I'm like, I couldn't care less. So I don't know. I'm just going to give myself a little bit more time, because now the live show is scheduled for the 14th of August. So I'm just going to give myself time. And maybe I'm going to push through it. But if not, I'm just going to DNF it, because I don't have time to read 1,000+ page books that I'm not enjoying. So maybe I'm too harsh. And maybe if this was a 500-page book, I wouldn't mind that much. But reading 3-star books that you're just like, okay, it's fine, I guess, I just don't have time for that anymore. And then the book that I will be starting if I finished Memories of Ice and Kushiel's Chosen, which, to be honest, now that I'm getting back into reading, I do think that I will finish Kushiel's Chosen pretty quickly, because I do want to know more about this. I do love Fader quite a bit. Then I will be starting The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This is the kind of series that I think I will absolutely love. I don't know why, but I love The Bone Shard Daughter, and I think that this will be a little bit similar. It's probably not, but I have the feeling that if you like one, you will like the other. Maybe it's because the covers are similar or something like that. Or maybe I heard the same people talk about both of these with praise. So I think that I will absolutely love this book, and that's why I want to read it very quickly. I also think that this is not going to be a very complex read. Like Kushiel's Chosen and That House Gates, these are complex books. And I think if you're in a reading slump or you're just getting out of it, a book like this might be perfect, where there's a lot happening, you feel a connection to the characters, but you don't have to think about it and make notes. So that's what I'm going to pick up next. This video was probably way too long. I'm definitely out of the game a little bit, because normally I make sure that I don't go on a rant for certain books, but here, well, it just happened. Please let me know in the comments down below what you have been reading recently that you absolutely loved and what you're currently reading. As always, I do hope that you enjoyed this video, and see you next time. Bye!